Okay, we may have a few more trickle in, but I wanted to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here at the library for this session. My name is Melanie Palmer. I'm a fundraising consultant based here in Northwest Arkansas. I want to thank the library for partnering with me to bring you all this program, this series of programs. I think probably most of you are aware this is a training series, so there are 4 different sessions, one of which we did last week. Today's session is going to be on sort of getting the structure in place for fundraising. Next week's session, we're going to do a really deep dive into a fundraising plan, like what's in the plan, how do you put it together, strategies for fundraising. And then the very last session is going to be building your support system as a fundraiser, which is really important. And so there'll be those 4 sessions. They're all on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, so next week and the following week. And then also, you do need to register for each session separately. So if you're planning on being with us next week and the week after, be sure you've registered. I think that's my housekeeping. This program kind of came out because Kelly and I, the library very generously hosts a Meet the Funders panel every June. They have for years. And it's a panel of foundations. And that program is always very popular. And this year we were talking after that program, and we said, man, it would be great if we just had like a fundraising boot camp for people who, learn a little bit at this session, but really want a little more comprehensive assistance. And so the library was willing to host this 4-part series. So I just want to say shout out to the library for being awesome and being willing to provide this and host this, of course, as all their programming is for free for you. So. I say yes, you say yes, right? That's the way it works. So I'm really glad to see all of you. Many of you were here last week, but we do have some folks who are new. So I would love for us to just go around and briefly introduce yourself and say who you are and who you're with, and if you are affiliated with an organization, and why you're here. Can I start with you, Neil?
Sure. This would be better for me to stand up. I'm Neil Carey. I retired a couple years ago, and then got involved in our church at our food pantry. I go to the United Methodist Church. It's a little bitty church out there. When we have 50 people at church, we're real crowded. But we started a food pantry there, and then we joined the Northwest Arkansas Food Pantry, or Food Bank, in December. We applied in October, we were approved in November, and December 3rd of 2019, we started serving the public. And so then I graduated to become the general manager. And so far this year, we've had expenses of over $52,000 of food purchases, plus all the food free stuff that we get. But it's a busy place, so I'm devoting a lot of time and energy to helping this. But we're feeding about 100 to 110 households every week, so we're doing some good in the Goshen community.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for being with us. That's awesome. Can I ask you? Sure.
My name's Sherry Thompson, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit that's called the Parasite Prevention Institute. Parasite is kids who kill their parents, and so we do the research around that and try to do outreach and education. And we're also establishing a statistical model, and hopefully we'll be able to put pieces in place for parents who feel like they're at risk at some point. We also, right now, for education and outreach, do a podcast, which is really fun to listen to. If you ever want to listen to it, let me know and I'll tell you how to get to it.
It's called?
Parasite Podcast.
Parasite Podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Liza Lopez-Love. I'm with Rooted NWA. I'm their operations officer. Rooted works, or traditionally has worked in education equity, and with the pandemic, like many of you, they kind of had a what are we doing moment, and have added health equity and economic equity. The executive director, Judith Yanez, is also enrolled in these classes, but is not here today because she's in Los Angeles. Lucky her, doing some research and finding other organizations that are like-minded and kind of picking their brains. So that's where she is today, and so I get to be here. That was last week.
Welcome.
We'll be here for the other ones.
Glad to see you.
I'm Eric Sizemore. Excuse me. I work with the Washington Madison County Drug Court, Veterans Treatment Court, And we're a diversion program. Instead of putting people in jail for addiction issues, we offer treatment. We also are associated with a nonprofit called Project Right Choice. Annually, we have a golf tournament that we raise funds for. I do work for the government, but I do not fundraise. I just want to qualify that.
Fair.
Please do not say that. I hate to say that. I shudder.
You heard it right here, folks.
I shudder with fear for saying that. But the proceeds go directly to our participants. So we're always looking for new ways to grow our tournament, and that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Broken Bakery is a life-changing commercial bakery led by a neurodiverse team, producing high-quality artisan bread for leading restaurants and hospitality groups in our area. Last year, when the pandemic hit, we began donating to most of the food banks. I don't know if you were one of the recipients of our donation program, that we donated over 140,000 artisan buns to all the schools and food pantries in our area. And my name is Sandra Baker. I was the crazy person who came up with this idea of having a non-profit commercial bakery without any experience at all. So I'm trying here to find out how we can keep this one going, and specifically that people still see us as a profit bakery. In reality, it is not. It is a training program, training people who are living with autism.
Thanks, Samara. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Teresa Berg, and I'm Executive Director at the Cancer Challenge. And the Cancer Challenge is a nonprofit organization that advocates and supports cancer care in Northwest Arkansas. We're proud to be a local charity, been in business. 2023 will be our 30th year. And we raise funds to fill gaps and, try to fill those disparities, economic disparities that people have from being either underinsured or no insurance, and help with screenings and navigation, education, prevention, all sorts of different funding initiatives. But we have a very competitive grant process that we run each year, and so we take requests for different programs and services that we will fund throughout the year. So a large part of my business is fundraising and raising funds to be able to fill those grants. So we usually get requests. It's normally over $1 million per year, and it's just not possible for us to, at this time, to be able to meet all of those needs, but we're hoping to increase that so we can help more.
Awesome. Thank you for being here.
I'm Sandra Gibbons. I started last month at the Northwest Arkansas Center for Sexual Assault as their marketing and development gal. We do rape kits. We provide rape kits, counseling services, education, community outreach. In my personal time, I actually just started a podcast with my best friend.
Cool.
So you
Not to train them.
yeah, lots of tips.
Thanks, Sandra.
Yeah.
Tanya Collins, and I'm with Apple Seeds. We're a teaching firm here in Fayetteville, although we cover geography from Gravette, Bentonville, all the way down through Farmington, Goshen, all over. Our mission is to inspire healthy living through garden-based education. So we have a teaching farm where we connect kids with where real food comes from and then teaches them how to prepare it. We also take that program into the schools. We work typically with more than 10,000 kids in person a year. Since adding virtual programming that is being used by educators in Arkansas, but because it's free and available, it's actually now been picked up in 25 states around the country.
Wow.
3 Canadian provinces, and then we just had a school in Iceland sign up for it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it comes with a teacher's guide, workbooks for kids, and an assessment, and it's all complimentary. It all works to grade standards, so they're getting reinforcement of math, science, reading, teamwork as part of the curriculum. With COVID, obviously the world has changed so much. Our business model, not only are we doing education, but we're also growing and donating foods. through those school programs so that we can be parts of continuity. Part of what we try to do is to connect with kids annually, either at our farm or in school in kindergarten through 6th grade, because we know that the food messages out there are not being combated by a one-and-done program. So we look to be a friendly face, a familiar face, and to bring familiarity to foods to them. And so we're doing that now through food distribution as well as through the virtual programming. The world of fundraising is changing as a result of COVID, and so we need to really rethink how we've done it. We've been a part of the Northwest Arkansas community since 2007 as a registered nonprofit, and a few years before that as just a community idea.
Awesome. That's tremendous. Thank you.
I'm Melanie Ocasio. I am the development director at Arkansas Immigrant Defense. Arkansas Immigrant Defense is a nonprofit immigration law firm, and we serve children and survivors of violence pro bono, and then everyone else on a sliding scale based on income. And I started 4 months ago, so I'm looking for all fundraising tips. And I also work with Melanie.
And Leilani moonlights with me. Spare time. Abundant spare time.
My name is Joe Hall. I'm a member of the board of directors at a nonprofit in Fayetteville called Free Geek Arkansas, whose primary mission is to keep electronic waste out of landfills. That's all I'll say.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
I'm Addison Mahaffey, and I work with Melanie.
You'll be getting our handouts from Addison. Thanks. Can I put you on the spot to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Kim Schuler, and I'm with the Arkansas Behavioral Health Integration Network. And we're a new nonprofit. We have been in existence for about a year. And so I'm interested in learning as much as I can.
Awesome. Good to see you back, Kim. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, it's my turn?
It's your turn.
My name is Art Kent. I'm with the Ozarks Adaptive Sports Association. My son is in Washington right now, which is the CEO of it. I'm the equipment manager. We're looking to start an association with adaptive sports.
Awesome.
So when he comes in, could you just point him so he can tell
Yes.
you all about it?
Yes. Absolutely. Welcome.
My name is Lance Reed, President and CEO of the Black Action Collective, a nonprofit that focuses on racial equity and addressing racial equity for African Americans and also anti-racism work. It's a grassroots nonprofit. We are rebranding, so we've been a nonprofit on our own for the last year, but originally we were Compassion Fed, a Black History Month team that has been doing Black History Month for the last 7 years. This will be our 8th year doing Black History Month in Northwest Arkansas. So just building capacity and just expanding my fundraising knowledge.
Awesome. Welcome. Glad you could join us. And Mirna, I think you were
Yes.
walking. Can I put you next?
Yes, sure. Hi, my name is Mirna Ordóñez, and I am with the Arkansas Latinas in BC, which is pretty much a cycling nonprofit organization that is promoting cycling in the whole Northwest Arkansas. Our main audience is the multicultural people in the area. We invite them to ride with us every week, do cultural events, and also develop nutrition and health workshops in order to provide them with additional knowledge to improve their health. So I'm with them.
Welcome. And welcome back.
I'm Sean Kent. I'm the founder of Ozark Adaptive Sports Association. We are the only adaptive sports program in the state of Arkansas, which is bad. So we're fixing that.
Welcome. Welcome back. Glad to see both of you back. Thank you all. Thanks for the introductions. I always am heartened and inspired by the passion of people who work in the nonprofit sector and want to fundraise for the missions that are important to all of us. So thank you all for being here. I'm glad to see you. So last week, for those of you that were here, we talked about overcoming our fear of fundraising. We talked about how fear of fundraising holds us back, right? And so I hope that you are coming here more excited today about the prospect of fundraising. Show of hands, how many people are more excited than you were before last week? Yes? Good. Yes. Okay, some of you weren't here. You're off the hook. Okay. So today we're really going to talk about what I just call getting your house in order for fundraising. So a lot of fundraising training focuses on sort of the ins and outs of fundraising strategies, implement this strategy for this strategy for this, and we're going to dive into that next week. But before we do that, I really wanted to talk about just how your organization needs to run in order to fundraise effectively. And I find a lot of organizations really struggle with this. It's kind of like, you can route to a destination, right? Your destination being your fundraising goals. You can map out the route that you're going to take to get there, but if your car doesn't run, you're never going to get there, right? So today we're going to kind of talk about how to make sure your car is running, and that is a process that involves not just you, the person in your organization that fundraises, but involves everyone in your organization embracing fundraising, putting the procedures, policies, tools in place to enable all of you to fundraise. Like, that's such a critical step. So we're going to be talking about that today, and I would welcome, as we go along, just wave at me or shout at me, anybody that wants to share anything or any challenges, or if I'm saying something that really resonates with you, or like, yes, I'm struggling with this, please flag me down, and I would love to talk a little bit about what you see. I'm going to try to find my clicker and try to make it work. Let's see. Beautiful. Okay. So what I always say about fundraising is that in order to be a really effective fundraising organization, you need to have a culture of philanthropy at your organization. So this is not just you knowing how to fundraise, or you and your board chair knowing how to fundraise. This is everyone on every level of the organization understanding the importance of fundraising, being committed. Now, we talked last week about how not everybody has to ask for money, right? You can participate in fundraising in other ways, but everybody needs to have a role, and for everybody to consider themselves part of the fundraising effort. Even if they're a program person whose job duties aren't fundraising specifically, when there are opportunities that arise to connect people with your organization, to build partnerships, everybody needs to be thinking about that and referring them to the right person in the organization, connecting people. So that's what I mean when I say a culture of philanthropy. And this kind of falls into three categories. The team that's on board at your organization, which should be everyone, right? We're going to talk about how to build that team. The processes that you have in place at your organization to support fundraising. Processes and procedures are not sexy, but they are so necessary, right? To maintain relationships. You can maintain a handful of relationships without any process or procedures, but as your fundraising program grows, you can't maintain 500 relationships without some really good processes and procedures, right? And we want you to have that many. And then the plan, having an effective plan. We're going to really dive into the plan next week, in next week's session, but I do want to kind of give a preview of that process as well. So those are the three things we're going to talk about today. Okay, so my favorite topic that we will start with is board leadership. So how many of you, some of you are board members, correct? Does anybody raise your hand if you're a board member? Okay, yes. So some of you may have paid staff at your organization. Some of you may be completely volunteer run. Your role, is different depending on which one of those is the case. But regardless of whether you have fundraising staff or not, board leadership is the number one thing in fundraising, by which I mean the board being involved and engaged in fundraising. And I do a lot of trainings where people will come to me afterwards and they'll say, this is all great, me knowing this fundraising is great, this is all great, but I can't get my board involved, right? Like, my board just won't come with me on this journey, and they're not here, and how do I get them engaged? This is a topic that people ask me about all the time. I get lots and lots of calls about board training. I do a lot of board training because it is so critical. So a primary role of the board, whether you have paid staff or not, is to ensure that the organization has the resources that you need to meet your goals, to make sure the organization is resourced. And we all know in nonprofit work that you can't ever have too many resources, right? Raise your hand if you've ever thought you had too much money at your nonprofit, right? So there's always more that we can do. But whatever goals that you have set for yourself for this year, for next year, the board is really responsible for making sure that you have the resources to meet those goals. And if you have set goals that are realistic, then this should be doable, right? Okay, so there are several different ways that board leadership manifests itself. The number one fundraising effort of every organization every year should be board giving. No matter what your nonprofit is, no matter what your fundraising goals are, all of your board members should make a financial gift to the organization. Now, that's going to vary in terms of size of the gift which is what you want, right? You don't want everybody given the same amount. Like some of your board members may give $20 a year and other board members may give $1,000 a year, and that's fine. It's not the amount, it's that all the board members are participating, right? So when I was at the shelter, we had a board where we had a board member who was a strong community leader. She was a single parent. She, had to work really hard to make ends meet at her household. Her annual gift to us was $20, and she paid it out over the course of the year in installments, right? It was important to her to give, and we were very honored by that gift, just the same. And I had other board members who were executives with an executive match at their organization, and their gift, was $10,000. But those were equivalent gifts to us, right? Because they're equivalently generous, right? So don't get caught up on, what size gifts. The important thing is participation. And it's important for several reasons. And this is what I tell boards that I do training on. It's important for several reasons. Number one, because the community will look at you and they will think, if your own board isn't inspired enough to support you financially, why would I? I mean, the board is the ones that knows the organization the best, that knows the organization's financial position, that knows the organization's impact, that knows how important it is. If the board won't give, then why would anybody else? And I think that's a fair question, right? Again, it's not an amount, it's just the act of giving. Another reason it's important is that sometimes funders or donors, prospective donors, will ask. I'm doing a grant proposal right now, and one of the questions that we have to answer in this grant proposal is what percentage of your board gives personally to your organization? And this organization that I'm working with I think they have 15 board members, and 2 of them have not given. And I told them, if you want this grant, you've got to get them to make a gift so we can say 100%, because 100% is the answer they want to hear on this question, right? So sometimes you have to have that to leverage other funding. And the other reason that this is crucially important, and you will know this if you're a staff member, is that it is demoralizing to be a staff member whose board won't support you. I mean, you all may not say that, but I will, because I've been that staff person, right? You're busting your butt every day, and you're looking at your financial picture, and you're worrying about making payroll, and your board members won't make a gift. It is demoralizing. So in support of your staff, and if you don't have staff, in support of the rest of your team, your volunteers, the rest of the board members, it is just crucially important for everybody to be on board. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Have I offended you? I would love to know your thoughts on that. Yes, Amar?
Typically, in my case, when I have a potential board members or current board members about board giving, sometimes I get the answer that I'm donating my time. Mm-hmm. And that is that they don't want to understand the distinction between donating time, that doesn't count into board giving. Mm-hmm. So how do you approach those people who believe that they can be on the board and that's it?
Well, both are important, right? I mean, both are critical. And there are a lot of people that feel that and I'm one of these, that feel that your time is really more valuable than your money, right? I mean, so I think first of all, we have to make sure that we're being appreciative of the sacrifice of people's time, because it is super important. And you can't operate without people's time. I mean, you can't operate if your board's not willing to give their time. It's equally important. But I think we have to say, I can't pay the light bill with your time. I mean, you have expenses that you just have to pay. And so board leadership in setting an example for the rest of the community that we are an organization that is worth supporting. We have financial needs, and it is worth supporting what we do. Like, that is the critical thing. It's not either or, it's both. Mm-hmm. Yes?
So how we solve the problem at the Black Action Collective, it's written in our bylaws that
Perfect.
There is a minimum financial contribution for board leadership. And it's just really to really create this culture of leadership giving, philanthropy in our community. Historically, African-American nonprofits are underfunded, mm-hmm. And so it's really trying to establish that framework from a board leadership perspective, and also to reinforce our commitment to leadership giving to our members.
Perfect. What was the reaction of your board to implementing that policy?
There was,
no pushback, this is what we're doing?
Yeah, this is what, like, I have no, I just tell them what, like, yeah.
Okay, I love it. I love it. And you probably feel like you have the backing of your board in your fundraising efforts.
It's really been, since I've been with the organization, starting out with the organization since the founding, with the founders, and so understanding the culture, understanding the need, and having a background in leadership. So it's really been refreshing, so I have gotten the buy-in. It's, my board is, it has a little bit different, we have different challenges. They rely on me because I've been there, and so they don't like to work. So that's the issue that
I do a lot, so I'm burdened with a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's great putting it in your policy. And yes, I love that. The other thing that's really critical about board giving and why it's so important is that your board are the ones that are responsible for proper stewardship of your donors' funds, right? Your board decides, makes budget allocations, decides where you're going to spend your resources, and your board should oversee how you treat your donors, even if the staff person is the one that's actually implementing it. And I have seen this happen. Boards take that a lot more seriously if they are donors too. If it's their money too, they pay a lot more attention. And I've seen that happen. When organizations implement 100% board giving campaigns, I've seen the board sit up straighter and pay more attention to how they treat their donors, right? I think that matters a lot too. Any other thoughts about this? And I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe just how to implement this in a minute, but any other thoughts just philosophically on this? Or any other? Yes?
You gave the example of the single mom that was only paying $20 a year, but are there any other, I don't know what I'm asking for, if it's conversations or tips or whatnot, when you're trying to create a board that looks like the community that you're serving, then obviously you might run into that where you have a whole bunch of board members that can't give a lot. And
you
so
should run into that.
That reduces then, though, the yearly amount that you're receiving from your board. And so how do you, is that just an organizational thing where, like, if we commit to that, that means then we have to offset it by greater fundraising other ways, or is that
so
you have to
your board are not
trust
your
it?
only fundraising source, right? You'll be doing other things too, but you should have that range. If you don't have that range, something's wrong, right? Because you're not really representing everybody that your organization serves. So you should have that wide range. And then you just, if you currently don't and you're looking to, you can either add board positions or you can commit to fundraising from other folks in other ways, not just your board.
Would the board, when you say 100% board giving, would let's say, for example, if I am the person that can only give $20, but I go out of my way to outside of any established fundraisers that the org is doing, that I go and try to find other people that are giving to me so that I could give to the organization, does that count as board giving, or is that fundraising?
That's a great question. I love it. So there's kind of a long answer. So first of all, let me take a step back. The way that you implement board giving can vary from organization to organization, depends, but the staff person should not solicit the board, right? Because their board are your bosses. The board should solicit themselves. And this really comes from the board chair. So if your board chair is hands off on fundraising, not interested in fundraising, you need to find a way to get a different board chair, because they are the critical person. Some organizations have a committee that does the board giving, like the board giving committee, and they ask the board, okay, now is the time where we all make our gifts and pledges. Most organizations allow board members to give or pledge. So if this is the first, I recommend this being the first thing you do every year. When I was at the shelter, like January 2nd, I was sending out the materials and my board chair was sending the email like, hey, it's time for our board pledges. People can always pledge and make the actual payment later in the year. Not everybody has to actually make the gift in January. But you do want people to either give or pledge right away in the year, because that gives you then the opportunity to go into the community and say, all of our board supports us, please join us. And it's powerful for your board members to say, this is an organization I support financially, and I would love it if you would come and learn about us. Like, that's powerful. So usually board gifts are confidential. So I think this also kind of goes with what you're saying. Confidential to other board members. Whoever processes your gifts is going to know, because they have to process your gift. Your executive director or your treasurer or whoever it is. But it's usually confidential what each person gives to the rest of the board. But typically you would report to the board. So you'd send out the materials like a pledge card or a form or something, please return these. And then you'd usually report back to the board chair, the board committee, the total amount. Like, the board has collectively pledged, $8,000, thank you. If you do this year after year, I would recommend setting a goal for the board, a collective goal, not a goal for individuals, but a collective goal. Like last year we gave 8,000, we're all still here, can we give 8,500 collectively this year? So you can do that. Again, the specific amount is confidential to other board members. Usually you're just looking at how close are we to 100% giving? Has everybody given or pledged? And what's the total amount that we've raised? And I find that boards are inspired by the amount that they give, too. Like I've seen board members who are a little hesitant to implement fundraising, but they look around and they're like, oh, we gave $12,000. Well, gosh, we can go out and raise some more. Like it gets the ball rolling right away, and it gives you a success right away at the beginning of the year, which I think is important for setting the tone. To your point, and I want to say this, there's an organization that I love tremendously called Community-Centric Fundraising. I think I may have given you their link last week. But they're an organization based in Seattle. They're entirely led by BIPOC fundraisers, and they're all about equity in fundraising. So changing the way that we do fundraising so that it is more equitable, so that there's greater participation, so that we're better serving our communities. They're all about doing things in a community-centric way as opposed to a donor-centric way, which is a shift that we need to make in fundraising. Totally on board with that. They say that the best thing to do is to count volunteer hours, count the value of volunteer time. So like somebody that gives $25, for example, cash, might contribute volunteer time above and beyond what the general board volunteer role is. So you take on a special project or you do something that offsets your expenses or something, and that should be included in the gift. I feel like all board members should give financially for all the reasons I just said. But it is something to consider, like is there a way to structure your board giving that allows for that? Again, board gifts are confidential, so you're not saying to people, hey, she gave 20 and you gave this. Nobody knows. I still think it's important to give financially for all those reasons I just said, but you can also consider doing something like that. And CCF has, I will give you their website if I haven't already, and they have all kinds of resources and testimonials and things on their website that are great. So you can look into that.
Members who are coming from diverse places, and for example, the woman that you said who struggles to give $20 a year, telling her she must do a project in addition privileges those who have money.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it too.
Okay.
I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying it's another option that you can look into.
Because everybody knows they're doing the special project. Everybody knows they haven't contributed in many ways, and it makes them a lesser person on your board.
That's the way I feel too. But I'm just saying that there are differing opinions out there that you can look into. Okay, so first thing that you do every year, structured board giving campaign. The board chair or the board committee sends out materials. Fill out this form if you want to make a pledge. If you want to donate, you can do this. And then usually it's the executive director, since they're processing gifts, or your board treasurer, keeps track of how much the board has raised collectively, reports back to the board. We achieve 100% board giving. Any questions or challenges to that? I'm happy to be challenged. Yes.
I don't have a challenge, but I have a question.
Sure.
And I don't know, maybe I'm asking you to get too deep into the weeds, and I'm happy to ask you afterwards.
It's okay, I love the weeds.
Our board tends to be pretty heavily involved in the financials of the organization, and so it's not really clear to me. You were talking about how typically the amount of donations that individual board members give are kept confidential. In our particular situation, it's not clear to me how that could be done, and so I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what sort of procedures or safeguards nonprofits typically put in place in order to preserve that confidentiality.
Sure. So you'll have a treasurer or a finance committee on your board who are the ones that really get into the nitty-gritty. So they will know because they're processing your donations. But typically the rest, traditionally, the rest of the board would just see like your P&L, which would have, individual contributions total, wouldn't list every donation that's been made. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So then you would just be looking at the total of what everyone has given rather than looking at the amount every individual person has made. But you may do it differently and can structure it differently. But I do think board giving should be kept confidential. I just think there's awkwardness otherwise. Okay. So the board giving is number one. Number one thing that the board does. Then the board should approve a fundraising plan. So we're going to talk next week really in depth about what is a fundraising plan and what does it look like. But the board should approve this fundraising plan for the year. Like it's usually annual. This is the amount of money we're going to raise. These are the main strategies that we're going to do. Like, yes, we agree this is where the organization is going to put its efforts in fundraising. And if your staff, like the staff are heavily involved in the creation of this, I'm not saying the board creates it, because you're the ones with more in-depth expertise probably, but the board approves it, should be, involved. And some people create a development plan and just give it to their boards, like, hey, the staff put together this plan, here you go. I don't find that works, because the board has no skin in that game at all. If they don't feel like they have had input, if they don't feel like they are collaborators in coming up with ideas, they won't participate, in my experience. So the board should be involved in some way in putting together this plan and approving it. And then the board members should have specific tasks assigned to them within that plan. So these are the things that we're going to do. Here are the specific things that the board is going to do. And we're going to talk about this in detail next week, but I'm just giving you kind of a general idea. If you don't have any staff, if you're an all-volunteer organization, then everything is going to be the board's job, right? Or you may engage other community volunteers for certain things. But it should be outlined really clearly. A lot of board members tell me, because people hire me and I'm a consultant and they feel like they can be honest, which I love. Sometimes they tell me, the ED is asking me to do this, but I have no idea why we're doing this or what it's going to matter or how this fits into anything. Like if they just feel like you're just shooting an email being like, hey, do this, they're like, why? You know what I mean? So if they have a plan where they can see, like, in order for us to reach this goal, this is my job. You get a lot more buy-in and a lot more participation than just that slingshot, like, I'm just asking you to do random stuff. It's not random. You know it's not random. But the board needs to understand the bigger picture, is my point. And then make fundraising participation an expectation of board service. So you shared that it's written in your bylaws, Lance, which is great, which is wonderful. I used to use a board contract. Everybody that joined our board signed a contract that said these are the expectations of board service. And one of them was make a financial contribution every year at a level that's meaningful to me. Attend 75% of board meetings. Whatever else you expect of your board members. And they sign it. And at the bottom of that contract, I always put, if I don't meet these requirements, I expect the board chair to have a conversation with me. It gives you a out. Like if it's not working out, this is what we're going to do. Because you have a limited number of board seats, right? You need people to be engaged, not just in fundraising, but in general too. So if you have that conversation on the front end when you're recruiting for your board, you're a lot less likely to have problems on the back end of people not participating. And from a board member's perspective, if you recruit board members without talking about fundraising, and then you're like, oh, by the way, you must fundraise, like that's not fair. It's not fair to board members to do that. So you need to have this conversation at the beginning when you're talking about joining the board. And you need to recruit people who are willing to participate. Again, not everybody has to ask for money. And you need to make that clear when you're talking about fundraising. Hey, it can be helping us thank people, helping us, bring people to organization, all that's fine. But you need to participate in some way. And if you have that expectation of board service, then I think you'll find you'll have more success in getting the board engaged. Any thoughts on that? We're spending a lot of time on this because it's so important and critical. If your board is not engaged in fundraising, this is like the number one thing you have to do. Like this is your step one. Okay, so here are some other things. My other thoughts about board engagement. I mentioned the board contract. Fundraising training is something you should be doing for your board. So I think particularly when board members come from places where they have had leadership positions, either in a faith-based setting or in a corporate setting, or they own their own business, or they've done nonprofit work before, I think we make the assumption that they understand fundraising, but there's no reason that they do, right? If they have not been a professional fundraiser, there's no reason to think that they know how to fundraise. Even if they have connections with people who would love what you do, there's no reason to think that they're going to understand how to connect those people with your organization, right? And a lot of times we put an unrealistic expectation on board members of, hey, like you should know how to do this, so please go do it. And then board members feel like, well, I don't know how to do this, so what they do is they just don't return your emails or they don't respond, right? Then you just get the crickets because they're not going to tell you, I don't know how to do this. So every year when you have new board members come on, I always did it with the full board, not just new board members. Like we have Fundraising 101. Like here is what fundraising is. Here is the way it works at our organization. Here is our fundraising plan. Here's the role of the board. If you feel uncomfortable with anything that we ask you to do, here's what you do. Come talk to me. Come talk to the board chair. Like we expect to equip you for this job that you've signed on for. And if you're not doing that, you're kind of setting up your board members to fail, right? We have to support them in this role. And some people will say, well, I'm the executive director, the board is my boss, it's not my job to manage my boss. Well, it kind of is, though. In nonprofits, it just is. You can rail against it, but it's the reality. Because we're the ones with the expertise. So we have to be willing to train and onboard. And that should be a structured process. Yeah. And I've had board members say to me, when I trained my own board, they would say, oh gosh, this was the part of board service that I was so nervous about, and now I feel so much better. And then they're on board for it. Mm-hmm. Yes.
My question is, if we're supposed to help train them, but we ourselves don't have any training or don't really have any experience in fundraising, do you have any resources, websites, places that we could go to look for examples of things like board contracts or...
Yes, I'm glad you asked, and I'm going to tell you, as part of this class, I'm going to send you samples of all these documents that you can edit yourself. Ah, round of applause. It's coming to you, that you can adapt yourself if you would like to. And then you can always bring in a fundraiser who is experienced to help you. And fundraisers do that all the time, because sometimes it's just easier to hear from somebody that's not in your organization. Yes?
One thing that I want to share, I have seen a lot of people in developing a lot of fundraisings, but some people don't like to fundraise because they come from a background where they are the ones giving money, and that pride is hard to overcome sometimes for them to come and say, hey, can I get money for this organization or something? So what I always advise them is like, hey, if you are in this organization and you believe what they are doing, the money that you are asking is not for you, it's for them. So on their behalf, you have to be proud of asking money in order to support this cause. So make clear that, like they are representing the cause and not themselves, and at the same time, feel they have to be proud of that. And asking for money is nothing wrong, especially if you are helping somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. Not asking for money for the Melanie Palmer Retirement Fund. Although if anyone wants to make a donation, you're welcome. Right, yes. And that's always easier, when you're working for an organization, as you all, I suspect are, that you're passionate about, that you're invested in, you always think about what's going to be done with the money that you raise. And that's the vision that you want to inspire other people to buy into too. I think it's also important, I think I put up here somewhere, staff have a close relationship with board members. This is really critical because fundraising involves vulnerability, right? We're not all comfortable being vulnerable. Board members are not all comfortable being vulnerable, and you have to know board members on a personal level to be able to talk about what is holding them back that we need to overcome. So I would say it's really critical for you to invest in your relationship with your board members, just personally, interpersonally. And I think, too, one of the things that to keep in mind, and we said this last week, of course, but some of you weren't here, so I'll repeat it, that not all board members have to ask for money, right? Board members can be involved in any part of the fundraising cycle. So bringing people to the organization, cultivating them, educating them, thanking them for their gift, like those are all valid fundraising participation steps. One of the most effective fundraisers that I ever worked with as a board member was a police chief or police captain in Rogers, later became the chief. And he told me in my first meeting, he's like, I am never raising money. He's like, I'm not doing it. He's like, I'll show up and I'll talk about how we handle domestic cases, but I'm never, ever raising money. And I said, you don't ever have to ask for money, but I would love for you to be involved in fundraising because nobody has your perspective. You can talk about how dangerous domestic cases are to respond to for your officers. You can talk about like how you know what to do with the perpetrator when you respond to a domestic, but you don't have anything to do with the victim. Like, where does she go? Like, you know how important the shelter is. Like, how do you work with us? How does this impact the community? Like, you have a perspective nobody has. And so I just brought him along to like every meeting I had. And I was like, you talk for a while about this. And of course, he can talk all day about his role and his, his work and his team's work. And donors would just be like, oh my gosh, yes, I will donate right away. I would always email him, guess how much money you raised this week? And he never asked for money, right? So keep in mind, if you are recruiting a board member with deep expertise in what you do, like that's how you use them. You make them, your mouthpiece for why the organization matters. So I think it's really important to also keep in mind and communicate to board members that that role is fine. That role is valuable, even if you are not comfortable asking for money. Any thoughts about any of that? Okay. Let me see. What else? Make sure that you are giving your board individual roles to play in your fundraising program and not treating them all as if they're the same. This is also super important, and it's a mistake that executive directors make and staff make that I see all the time, and I tell them, this is a mistake you're making. Like, you're just sending out an email saying, hey, we need all board members to do this. We need all board members to sell 10 tickets to our event. We need all board members to do this, as if board members all are the same. But they're not, right? You're going to have some board members that love selling tickets, and they will go sell a ton of them. You're going to have other board members that aren't comfortable with that. They would rather come to your event and be assigned a few people to talk to about the organization. Like, that's a more comfortable role for them. Or you have other board members that are going to want to, help you choose your keynote speakers and your honorary chairs, like, because they're well connected. That's their role. So I think a strategic fundraiser finds that role that each board member likes to play and then gives them the opportunity to do that. Does that make sense? You had something, Kelly, you were going to say.
What do you do if you're in a situation where there's someone who wants to be a part of your board, who's willing to give you a lot of money, but they want to be on your board because it looks good for them to be a part of what you're doing,
right?
And they don't want to participate in any other way? Do you refuse them and refuse the money, or?
Nobody buys their way onto your board. Like, that's number one, right? That's icky and gross. Nobody does that. What I love to do, is I love to have a honorary board, and this is where I put people who want a leadership role, but don't want to do the work. Because an honorary board, and an honorary board is like the people that I would send things to first, outside of the normal board who already knows, like, hey, we're making this change to our programming, help us spread the word, or hey, we're having this event, spread the word. It's like people who are just going to talk about you in the community, which is valuable, which you want. But they're not a drain on your time, they're not a drain on your resources, and they're not holding you back, they're not in a decision-making capacity. That's what I like to do. And I also like to do that for board members that you may already have on your boards who just refuse to participate in fundraising. It's not the right fit for them, which is fine. You still want them involved, but I like to put them on that advisory board where they can still benefit the organization, but they're not a large commitment of my time, and they're not in a role that they're not comfortable with. Yeah, you can also just ask them, have a hard conversation, but I kind of like the honorary board. Also, great place for past board members whose terms have ended, but still want to contribute, but can't make the commitment anymore. It's also a good place for them. Did you have your hand up, Irma? Oh, sorry. Okay. I think we've covered all this. Yes. Focus on fundraising at board meetings. One of the things that we always did at all of my board meetings, which I loved, and which my board had all kinds of mixed emotions about at first, but grew to love, was we would start every board meeting with a spreadsheet or a document that would detail everything every board member had done for the organization. So this includes fundraising, but also would include anything else. So, Tanya thought of a new way, helped us implement a new way to present our financials to the board. Jeff introduced Melanie to the Lowell mayor. Hayes did, worked with us to solidify our emergency, evacuation plan, such and such and such and such. And it was fundraising roles, but also other things. I called it the celebrate and shame method, because my board members did not want to be the person that didn't have something by their name, because there was a name for every board member, like in a chart, right? So they'd be like emailing me like 2 days before the board meeting and like the day of the board meeting, you got this in the chart, right? Like, you remember I did this, right? It's going to be on there, right? And we would look at it together, and the thing was, we would be like, this is awesome that you did this, it's awesome you did this, it's awesome you did this, and it was a way for the board to understand the contributions they were all making, because this is what happens on a board. You don't necessarily see everything everyone's doing in between your board member meetings. So it's important for board members to understand the level of commitment and involvement that everybody else is having, but also board members do not want to be the person that doesn't have anything by their name, right? It's a way of reaffirming the commitment to, like, you got to work to be on this board, you got to be doing stuff to be on this board. And fundraising is part of that, and so especially for board members who may have a little hesitancy about fundraising, I love to just cheerlead like the things that they do, and that helps them build confidence, it builds the team's confidence. I love that. If board members are doing fundraising things from you and you are never mentioning it or never recognizing it, like, they're not going to keep doing it, right? So be sure that you are an appropriate cheerleader. And then find a graceful way for board members to transition to another role if the board service is not for them. So this is what I was talking about with the honorary board. Mm-hmm. And it may be that they transition to a different role at your organization, volunteer-wise, which is fine too. But make sure that you have a way for that to happen so that they don't just feel like, hey, we're kicking you out because this is not what you're doing. Okay, any thoughts about any of that? We're going to move on to other topics, but I just wanted to spend a long time here because it's so important. Any thoughts about any of this? Anybody disagree with any of this? Like, no, this is not the way we do it. I don't think that it's the way we ever will do it. I'm happy to be disagreed with.
She's welcome to send her money giving person over to me. I'll
Right.
take her money.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. All right, so we will move on then we're going to assume your board is engaged and doing all those things. So then the next thing you have to have in place is staff. So if you have staff, now if you're an all volunteer run organization, your volunteer board is going to be doing a lot of this. But if you have staff who are enthusiastic about fundraising, right? If you have staff on your team who are charged with fundraising, who are leaders in your fundraising program, and they don't like fundraising, you have a problem, right? You would be surprised at how often I see that. Staff professional development in fundraising, super important for your staff to get professional development in fundraising. It should be. And you may say, well, our budget is tight, we don't have the money, blah, 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 but that's cutting off your nose to spite your face, right? Because if you have fundraising staff development, you'll raise more money, right? So this is something you need to be invested in. Staff need to have a supportive network of other fundraisers, and that's what the whole last session of this series is going to be about, because this is so critically important. Because a lot of times we're the only fundraisers on our staff, right? And whether you're if you're a volunteer who's shouldering the majority of that burden, or if you're paid staff, that's lonely. It's lonely to be the only person that knows what's going on, right? And especially if you are facing an uphill battle on some of these things, developing a culture of philanthropy, getting your board involved, like you need other fundraisers to support you in that process. So find somebody else that is relatively in the same boat you are. I am looking at a room of you, perhaps. Find somebody else, agree to get together once a quarter for lunch, just to talk and vent and share ideas. It makes such a difference. I had that group when I was a young fundraiser, and I would just come and be like, I learned more in an hour than I ever learned in any other setting, right, from my fellow fundraisers. Okay. And then you need to have enough staff or enough volunteers and engaged volunteers for your fundraising goals. You need to make sure they're realistic. If you're like, we're going to raise, we've never had a fundraising program before, but we're going to raise $1 million with, half a volunteer, right? No, you won't. So make sure that your goals are realistic, that people are set up for success. And remember that the more you invest in fundraising, the more you will raise, right? Okay. Having the staff. Okay, having the volunteers. So we talked about board members who are volunteers, of course, but you also would, in an ideal setting, I would encourage you to have volunteers that aren't board members, but who are fundraising volunteers. So a lot of times this looks like a board committee. Like you may have a fundraising committee of your board that's chaired by a board member, but may also include non-board members who are volunteering with your organization. It's a great way to vet people for board service. So if you're going to have a board opening next year and you're wondering who's going to fill it, like putting people on a fundraising committee and seeing how they do, how engaged they are, is a great way it's a great succession plan strategy. So volunteers, just like the board, should have specific work in your development plan, in your fundraising plan. They should have a really specific task that they're assigned to do, really specific to how it's going to contribute to your goals. And then it takes staff time, as you know, to recruit and manage volunteers. If you're an all-volunteer board, it's going to take volunteer time from your board to manage other volunteers. That's just the way it is. But again, you're going to raise more money if you have effective volunteers in place. You're going to train, I didn't put this up here, but of course, you're going to train your volunteers just like you do with the board on your fundraising in general, your fundraising program. You're going to provide them with support. And you want volunteers with a variety of skills and networks. If all of your volunteers work for the same company, that is not what you want. Or if they're all from the same, faith-based organization, unless you're raising money for your organization. Otherwise, you want a more diverse group than that because you want to reach different groups of people. And you want fundraising volunteers who are going to help you reach different communities, different groups of people. Any thoughts on this? And you want to think about what kind of donors you want to reach, like what donor communities you want to reach, and you want to make sure they all have a seat at the table, either from your board members or from your fundraising volunteers. Because that's the way fundraising happens. It's relational, right? Remember, it's not transactional, it's relational. So who has the relationships to build your organization's connections with particular communities? Any thoughts about that? Challenges that you see with that? Okay, we're comfortable with fundraising volunteers. Okay. I also love working with students, with college students for fundraising volunteers. They are eager to learn. They are high energy. They're enthusiastic. They take direction well. I love working with college students. So if you have board members who are willing to lend their networks and play that role, but you need some busy bees, like students are a great resource for that. I presented to a group of students yesterday that were with Rotaract, the college arm of Rotary. And it was like 100 people that came to this event that wasn't for credit and there was not any incentive, and they were all just there to figure out how they volunteer and how to get into fundraising. And I was like, okay, like there will be an organization out there that would love to have your involvement. So tap into them if you haven't already for helping you get things done. Okay, so there's some processes and tools you need to have in place to fundraise effectively. Number one, you need to have a donor database. So how many of you all have an actual donor database software that you use? Okay, yes. Okay, the rest of you have work to do. You need to have a donor database. So this is a specific software that houses your donor records. Now, I meet organizations all the time that say, well, we have spreadsheets and the spreadsheets are working fine. And I find that you do have spreadsheets. You have 26 spreadsheets. The people overlap in ways that you don't understand. You can't run a report on what the total giving of a person is over the course of this year, last year. You can't run a report on all your donors that live in Rogers or Goshen or wherever it is. You can't run a report of, you know, what donors are affiliated with particular organizations or communities. Like, it's not useful if it's in 100 different places. If you're serious about fundraising, you need to have a donor database because your donor database will do all those things for you. I was working with an organization last year, and I asked their executive director, this organization was 4 or 5 years old, relatively new. I asked their executive director, I said, how many donors do you think you have already? Like, would you estimate how many donors do you already have? And he said, well, I think probably 100, like right around 100. And I said, people that have ever given. He's like, yeah, about 100, I think. Like, okay. So one of the projects I did for them was set up their donor database. So he sent me the 26 spreadsheets. Some of my team, who I'm eternally grateful for, wrangled all of that data into the donor database. Well, they had 500 donors. And I said, this is the reason you're struggling with fundraising. You forgot about 4/5 of your donors, right? These are people that have already given to you, that you already know love you. Like, you have forgotten about them. And that's transactional fundraising, right? You're not building relationships with these people. You forgot they exist. So that's your first job, is to build those bridges back. But it's hard to keep track of in spreadsheets. The other thing donor databases will do for you is that you can set yourself tasks and alerts tied to a donor record. So let's say that I have lunch with Leilani, and Leilani tells me that, you know, supporting victims of crime is her passion in life, and she always gives to that cause. And I say, Leilani, we're launching this new program. It's a transitional housing program for people that have fled domestic violence or other violence. And Leilani says, that sounds awesome. I'd love to be involved with that. I do my giving in November. Would you follow up with me in November? And I'd love to talk more about this. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go out to my car after our meeting. I'm going to pull up my mobile phone, which has my donor database app. I'm going to put in the notes from my meeting with Leilani. Like, Leilani shared that she cares about victims of crime because of this and this and this. She shared that she likes to do her giving in November. I'm going to put Leilani's contact information in there so I know how to reach her, that she's told me she wants me to use. And then I'm going to put myself an alert for November 1st. Follow up with Leilani Ocasio about supporting this program. If it is March, I am never going to remember that unless I have that alert, right? And by the time November rolls around, even if I have some sort of like list that I'm keeping, by the time November rolls around, I will have forgotten what Leilani told me. Not because I don't care about Leilani, but because I have met with 300 people since then. I'm going to forget what she said she's interested in, and I'm probably not going to follow up with her, right? But the donor database will ping me on November 1st and say, hey, follow up with Leilani, and it will connect, that will be linked to her file, so in the donor database, her record, so I can pull it up and I can remind myself, okay, yes, this is what we talked about. That's the power of a donor database, and you can't do that with spreadsheets.
Can you recommend some programs?
I'm not affiliated with any of them. I get no kickback from any recommendation, but I love Bloomerang, and a lot of my clients use Donor Snap, which is also good. I haven't used that personally, but I've heard good things. And donor databases usually will charge you a monthly fee based on your number of records. So you can start with a pretty affordable thing, and as your donor database grows, it will grow with you.
Because we couldn't figure out who was good, who was bad.
Right.
And we just gave up.
Right. Boomerang will also do wealth screening. So if you enter someone in the database, it'll tell you what gifts they've made to other organizations, and that's really helpful to you. It'll run reports like if I want to know who gave last year, this is any donor database will do this, who gave last year to us but hasn't given this year yet. It's October. Like who gave it to us last year but hasn't yet given this year? Like I need to be following up with them now, right? Who tends to give at the end of the year versus who gives in February after bonuses come out of Walmart? Who are those people I need to be calling, right? I mean, it matters. It matters. Also, donor databases save you from embarrassment. They will save you, if you have accurate records, from calling, second spouse by first spouse's name when you meet them somewhere, right? Which happens. If you don't have good records, you're like, hello, Mrs. No, actually, I'm not that. Oh, no, right? You will make a note in the donor database. Second spouse is named this. Will also prevent you from trying to contact people that have passed. Donor databases will usually do an automatic screening and they will alert you, right? Mm-hmm.
How do you find that database type of website or is it not, or how do you find that?
So you mean find one to use? Like how do you select one?
Yeah, what to do?
Yes, I think you can search for nonprofit donor databases if you want. Bloomerang and DonorSnap, you can search by their keywords. Bloomerang, like a flower, bloomerang. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm wearing a mask, which is awesome.
I know.
Like the flower and then like a boomerang, bloomerang.
Yeah, there are several out there.
Yeah.
I have several that I use that all integrates into one, based on just like DonorBox is a good one that I know that Federal Library uses.
Awesome.
That I use it as well. But it gives that donor relationship, that security that they're donating to a secure organization. So when you're looking at the software, look at that in mind as well is who has an integration that already has the integration for taking.
Is DonorBox one of those? I have DonorBox, but they don't give me anything.
Well,
that's just where our money comes through.
Yeah, so I have it integrated into my Neon software, and so it has all my events, it has all my membership, it has all my anyone that subscribes or hits to my website or anything that it tracks it, because I hate spreadsheets, and so I need something that I can just see and
sounds cool.
Right.
Yeah. And donor databases will do awesome things like you can integrate your email marketing. People, you can set up your, I'm not a tech person, but you can set up your widget online where people donate online and it will automatically go into the database. You can send out fundraising appeals straight from the database. Integrates with QuickBooks, a lot of them do. So you should look for one that's going to integrate with other things that you do. And any donor database company will be happy to give you a demo. They will make sure you know all the things that they do. Yeah. And I think I would just caution you to choose something that's easy to use, that has an easy, clear interface, because what you want, especially if you're an all-volunteer organization, you're going to want all your board members to be able to use it. So be sure to just pick something that's clear and easy to use, because, databases of any kind are just trash in, trash out, right? So you want to be sure you're putting good data in and that's easy for people to do.
That was my experience with Salesforce. Even though I love Salesforce, I just don't have the time to learn the integration. So when I do get a team, we'll switch over to that. But that's be mindful of that, because it can be very cumbersome to do all of that.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Okay, so I hope I've convinced you to invest in a donor database. And again, you may think, well, my budget is tight, but you will raise more money if you have your records. So you're going to have income associated with this investment. You're going to have a case statement, and we'll talk about this next week in detail, but this is like a one-pager about what you're raising money for. So how people can donate, what they're donating to, what the money is going to do. This is really critical for your staff and for your board. It's their talking points. Board members and volunteers and staff members who aren't used to fundraising get real nervous when you say, just go out and talk, which I understand, right? They need their talking points that they can share with people or email to people or post on their social media. So make sure that you have that marketing piece designed for them. And then if people, have follow-up questions, I always tell volunteers especially too, like if people have follow-up questions, that's when you refer them to the staff, right? You're not expected to be a super detailed expert on every single thing, or they're referred to your volunteers on your board who are really more knowledgeable, and that's fine, right? Not everybody has to be an expert on everything. Okay. Here is very critical. You need to have financial procedures in place to manage restricted funds. So if a donor gives you a gift that is restricted to one purpose, so I'm going to make a $5,000 gift and I want it to go to an event that you're hosting, right? You need to have a way in your financial procedures to make sure that you don't spend that money on anything else, right? And organizations do that a lot of different kinds of ways, but you need to have a procedure to make sure that you're not accidentally spending money on something that a restricted gift was not for, okay? And the accountants or your treasurer on your board should know how to do that. But you need to have a procedure for that in place. And you need to have division of duties, right? There needs to be more than one person involved in your finances, you know that. There needs to be more than one person that understands what this procedure is. Okay. And then you need to have a stewardship plan. I'm going to give you a sample that's part of what you're going to get. But a stewardship plan is basically when someone makes a donation to your organization, buys a ticket to your event, whatever it is, what happens? They should get a thank you, prompt thank you. If it's an event ticket, we can't wait to see you at the event. Here are your details. If it's a donation, like thank you so much for donating. We really appreciate that. How fast does that happen, and who is responsible for it? Right? And this should be different levels of folks, right? If a board member makes a gift, it should be the board chair that calls, or the board committee that we talked about that calls, right? To say thank you. If it's somebody that donates, $50 through your website, it's probably your development staff that's going to call and say thank you, or going to email or whatever. You need to have a procedure in place for how you respond to gifts so that you can make sure that you are responding. And this makes a difference to donors, right? I have some friends who are fundraising staff, and they're hosting a walk this month, which it's a long story. I'm going to end up participating in, but I thought I couldn't. I just went on their website, and I just made a donation in the equivalent amount of the ticket price. And I got a text from their development director within about 2 minutes of making that gift. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Well, obviously, I'm going to give again, right? It matters to them. Like, my gift mattered. And how fast you respond and how sincerely you respond, it matters. I think I mentioned this last time. When I was on staff fundraiser, we would always contact all of our donors in October, this month. All of them. We'd personally contact every single donor that gave to us this year, just to say thank you. Just as here's what we've done this year. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for your support. People loved that. But you have to have a plan to make that happen, right? Okay. So I will give you a sample of a stewardship plan, but you should have one. Some sort of plan for what you do as an organization when someone makes a gift. And then a gift acceptance policy and a third-party fundraising agreement. This is what I call the save yourself a lot of headaches policies. If you find policy, implementation to be onerous, it's going to still save you even more headaches to have these two in place. So a gift acceptance policy outlines what kinds of gifts you accept. So everybody takes cash, right? Like we all universally take cash. But what if somebody wants to donate their boat to you? Or what if somebody wants to donate stock? Or what if somebody wants to donate, I don't know, mineral rights or something more obscure? Do you take that or not? There's no necessarily right or wrong answer, but you should have a plan for if you suddenly own property, what do you do with it? What's the process to make sure that there aren't liens on the property, that it's not going to cost you money to accept this gift? Like, think through those things. Because if somebody calls you, when you get that phone call that somebody wants to donate something like that, if you have a policy in place, you just refer to the policy, right? Yes, we'll accept that. This is the way that works. Or no, I'm sorry, we don't accept gifts of whatever. People don't get upset about policies, but if you just say, no, I don't think we really want that, just because I don't feel like it, then you're going to offend people, right? So just have the policy in place. You'll save yourself a lot of headaches. Just have the policy. And then a third-party fundraiser is like, my women's group at my church wants to do a fundraiser for you, and we're going to donate the proceeds to you. a couple of important things you need to control, which is what permission do I have to use your logo? Because I'm going to take your logo and it's Halloween, right? So I'm going to turn it orange because that matches my flyer, right? Can I do that? Or this is what happens a lot of time too. I'm going to do this fundraiser, or it's going to benefit you, and you say, great, that's wonderful. Okay, well, can I use your marketing team to design our information? And can you come and speak? And do you have any board members that would help us find sponsors? And they really want you to do it, right? Which is wonderful that people want to be involved, but you probably don't have time because you already have a fundraising plan you're implementing. It's really easy to get sucked in by that. So having an agreement that says, you know, we are willing to show up and accept a check and say thank you, but we cannot lend our marketing finance board to your event. You cannot use our logo in this ways. You know, please follow our media, our what do they call them? Guidelines for for our artwork, for our logo. Like having that outlined will just save you a lot of headaches. So please just implement it. And I will give you a sample of both of these things that you can adapt for your own uses. Okay, so those are the tools, process to have in place. So then you're going to have a detailed development plan, and this is what we're going to talk about next week, so I'm not going to go real in depth on this, but should be specific goals for your fundraising activities, including timelines and who is responsible. If your goal is we're going to raise $20,000 from individual donors this year, and there's nothing else in your plan than that, it will not happen, right? Make sure that you have a detailed plan. Make sure it is relational. Make sure you're engaging a variety of people who are going to care about your mission. Make sure it's inclusive. Make sure it matches your organizational budget. So in other words, if our budget this year is, you know, $50,000 for our organization, like your fundraising plan needs to be $50,000, unless you have earned revenue that's also contributing, right? Maybe your budget is $500,000, but you have $200,000 in earned revenue of some sort. Then your detailed fundraising plan should be for $300,000, right? So make sure that it's matching, it's funding your budget and what you want to do. If you have a program that you're wanting to launch in the future and it's going to take several years to get your seed money, then you could budget a surplus because you're raising money for this program you're going to launch in the future. But you shouldn't be going in the red. You should at least plan to be in the black, typically. The plan should be created in collaboration with everybody who's going to be involved in implementing it. So don't sit in your development director office and say, yes, this is what I want everyone to do, and then email it to them and say, here is your plan, right? You will not get buy-in that way. You want to make sure that you're including everybody who you're going to expect to participate. Because then you get to say, remember when we talked about this? remember, Sandra, this was your idea. And so I'm really excited to see you do this month, right? You want to involve people on the front end. And then plan the work and work the plan. You know how it works. Okay, we're going to dive into like what's in a development plan next week, but this is just you need to have a plan in place. Okay, what else are we saying? So this is my favorite part as a fundraiser. When I was a fundraiser on staff at an organization, and if you're an all-volunteer organization, this is equally applicable. It's really important to educate your coworkers or your fellow volunteers in fundraising, even if fundraising is not their job, ostensibly, because everybody needs to. When I was on staff, I always said every person on our organization is a development person, because we all have networks to contribute. We all know people who'd want to be involved in the organization's work. You know, we all are spokespeople for the organization. We're all talking about the organization in the community. We are all development people. Now, you may not have job duties in your job description related to fundraising, but at least referring people to your fundraising department or to your executive director or to your board, at least kind of casting your net and bringing people onto the organization is the job of everyone, right? And hopefully you believe in your work strongly enough that you want to do that, right? That you want to talk about what you do. So every person is a development person. Have that mindset, and then make sure that your team knows what your development plan is, how it works, how they can contribute. That's not necessarily an expectation, like I'm assigning you a task, but it's just like you need to be aware of what we're trying to accomplish as a team. And you would be surprised at how often support comes out of the woodwork once people, oh, I just never really thought about asking people to support us, right? Right? We were talking about Alex and Chelsea who work at the food bank, who are program staff. Like fundraising is not their job. The food bank has a whole fundraising team. Their job is to work with partner agencies to train on OASIS. But, you know, they post stuff on their social media. Hey, it's Hunger Action Awareness Month. Would you please donate? Like, they're raising money, and why wouldn't they? Like, it's the cause they love. So make sure that everybody on your team knows how to do that if they so choose, and that they're involved in and getting updates on your fundraising program, right? Don't isolate your fundraising program from the rest of what you do, because that's the kiss of death for your fundraising program. And it also leads to divisions between, if you are a large enough organization to have program and fundraising staff, it leads to divisions between your administrative staff and your program team if you don't have that open communication of, we are all part of this. Okay, a culture of gratitude. I loved when I was on staff the first hour of every Monday and the last hour of every Friday were always permanently blocked off on my calendar for writing thank you notes. Right? It's the first thing I did at the beginning of the week, and it's the last thing I did at the end of the week. It was a great practice of gratitude for me, for my mental health. It set the tone for my week. It, sent me out the door on a positive note. If you're a volunteer, consider setting a time every week to write thank you notes to the people that support your organization. It's powerful, and people love it. Not many people write thank you notes anymore by hand. They just don't. And so when you send one, people are like, wow. They know that you took the time, not just to shoot off an email while you're stopped at a stoplight, which is fine, maybe. But they know that you took the time to really think about them and send them well wishes. So develop a gratitude practice that's good for you, good for your mental health, and good for your donors. Again, that thanking is such a big part of fundraising. That stewardship thanking part is so important. And then also with the rest of your team, be sure to show gratitude to your supporters, your donors, and your team, all of it, for what you are able to do. And then you have to be serious about stewardship, meaning you have to be serious about keeping people involved after they've contributed, about keeping them informed, about building those long-term relationships. The organization that I work with, a lot of organizations that are great at stewardship, but I will say Peace at Home Family Shelter is the best at stewardship. If you ever donate to Peace at Home, it's like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you from every level of their organization. And I am not a major donor, right? But it's like they are on it, and they are sending you their newsletter every week, and they are letting you know what's going on, and they're like, this is what you did, and we're launching this new program, and we just wanted you to know. And I've gotten, again, I don't donate a ton of money to them, but I get calls from their board, I get handwritten notes from their staff, they are serious about it. And it's no secret as to why they're such a successful fundraising organization, because their donors are with them for the long term, right? Okay. And this doesn't have to be complicated or expensive, right? Stewardship, you don't have to be doing something super fancy. One of the most powerful, I'm going to tell the story without crying. One of the most powerful ways that I have ever been treated as a donor, again, I am nobody's major donor, but one of the most powerful things that anyone has ever done for me, the Children's Safety Center in Washington County, if you've ever been to their facility, they serve kids who've experienced abuse or neglect, and every kid that comes into their facility puts their handprint on the wall, paints their hand and puts it on the wall. So there's 12,000 handprints on their walls. It's incredibly powerful. If you ever have a chance to go for a tour, I strongly encourage it. And so the handprint is their logo. It's sort of the most visually powerful way that they communicate with the public. So this last year, they took a piece of colored copy paper, they folded it in half, and their kids love making their handprints, and a lot of times the kids that come to the center want to make other handprints. They put it on the wall, and they're like, what else can I put a handprint on? So they give the kids the option, if they want to, of putting their handprint on this folded piece of paper. It's not a photocopy, it's the actual paint, of a kid's hand. And they mailed that to me. And on the inside, their staff member just wrote, thanks for your support, from Emily. Not expensive, not sophisticated. Well, of course, it was very powerful to me to get that. And I had set it on my coffee table in my house, and my 6-year-old picked it up, and she put her hand on the handprint, and she said, Mom, this hand is exactly the same size as my hand. And I looked, and it was exactly her hand. So I went in the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes, and then what did I do? I took my phone in there with me, and I sent them more money. Of course I did, right? So it doesn't have to be slick and sophisticated. Just being sincere and thinking about your donors and showing them why they matter, that makes people emotionally connected to your organization in a way that is powerful. So organizations that are good at fundraising take that part of it really seriously. Okay. All right. Here are the resources that I'm going to send you, and Kelly is going to share the registration list with me, so I will email you, or perhaps Addison may email you, thank you Addison in advance, a sample board contract. So this would be the contract that you would have board members sign. These are just samples for your consideration, adaptation. I'll send you some sample case statements. So this is that marketing piece that we talked about, that's the talking points. fundraising agreement. I'll send you the gift acceptance policy. I forgot to write it here, but I'll send that. A sample development plan. Like the one pager and a case statements are the same. I was doing this late at night, sorry. But I will send you all these things in email so that you have something to work with, okay? Really important to get your processes and tools in place to support your work and to support the work of your team. Okay, that is what I have. I think that is what, I have a final thought. What was my final thought? We'll find out. Okay, yes, fundraising is making friends that change the world, right? So how do you manage relationships when you don't have 5, but you have 500? How do you keep people involved? How do you keep them connected to your organization? How do you manage those relationships? That's what it comes down to. So you need to put in place whatever policies and procedures and team and resources you need to make that happen. Okay, what questions do we have? That is what I have. Yes.
I just, two questions. I have created, just last week, something for the board to sign up. And do you mind if I send it to you? You can maybe pick it up for me. It's my first time.
Sure, of course.
I've only been a nonprofit for like 2 months. So I'm like, this is a scary thing for me, but I'm trying to do my best I can. So is that okay if you can review it for me, maybe in your task and
sure, of course.
And go from there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you have a lot of policy work to do on the board level, put together a board committee for that, even if you have paid staff. Like, make a board committee of, okay, we're going to look at what all we need to implement and help out. If you're an all-volunteer organization, obviously, you'll be doing that work collectively. What other questions do we have about anything that we've talked about? What do you think your biggest challenge is in this arena, in this kind of tools, team, processes arena?
Mine is asking the board for money.
Okay, the board should ask themselves for money. Oh, I'm glad you said that. Wait a minute. Leilani has done a solid for all of you. This is the other thing I'm sending you. Thank you for saying that. I'm sending you this one-pager on board involvement in fundraising, which Leilani designed. Thank you, Leilani. This is like a one-pager of like what boards ought to do on fundraising. So I'm going to email this to you so you can forward it to your board and you can tell them that I said so, okay? It's also a guide for if you are a board member. Like this is kind of a guide for here are the steps if you're wanting to implement a fundraising plan, like here are the board steps. So it goes over the fundraising cycle, board, all of that. So I'm going to email this to you as well. Okay, and hopefully that will help for anybody who's not here. Okay, what else? Somebody had their hand, was it you, Neil, that had your hand up with a challenge or something you wanted to share? Oh, okay, great. Great. Yes, Leilani.
I just feel like I completely overlooked the getting your staff involved. I had a community engagement event on Saturday, and when I was talking about it, a lot of our program staff were like incredibly excited to go. And then it started leading to more questions like, oh, well, when people ask us what do we need, what do we say? And that was just work that I realized that I hadn't done. And then we just hired a new attorney that was like, I love asking people for money. I'm like, wait a minute, like, thank you. But she doesn't know what we need because I hadn't, like, that wasn't part of her orientation, was me telling her, like, these are our fundraising goals, this is what we're looking for. So all the reminders on that has been really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Also, inviting your staff to give. Not a requirement, but inviting them to give. If you would like to give, like, here's how to do it. I've, worked with organizations whose staff want to give, but they just don't know, like, literally don't know how. So make sure it's an option. Yeah.
So I'm coming into a position where we literally have hundreds of people that there was no stewardship plan whatsoever. And so I'm coming into this role, and I plan to call every single person on this list. But it's just, I guess my issue is I don't know how to navigate the awkwardness because it should have been done in the past, right? And I don't want to throw my team under the bus for not doing these basic things. It's just trying to get those talking points.
So you're in a new position. So if you're in a new position, it's super easy. You say, we've never had a dedicated development person before, and I know that we've had trouble in the past with things like stewardship or keeping in touch with our donors because we just haven't had that person. And now I am that person, and so I'm really excited to be able to get to know you better and to connect you with the organization and like let's get together, and I would love to hear your perspective on what you would like from us as a donor, how we can improve, like tell me and I think if you give people the opportunity to share their feelings, Like, even if those feelings are negative, I mean, you just say, yep, I totally understand that. It's totally valid. We're committed to doing it better from now on, so do you have ideas? Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of times people just want to say, hey, you did this wrong. And you just say, yep, we did, and we're doing it better now from now on. Right? I've been in that position myself, having to apologize for a lot of things. But it's okay. It doesn't hurt to say we're sorry. Anything else?
Where can we find the presentations that you are giving?
I will email you a link to the presentation too, along with all those things. And if you were here last week, you should have gotten that today from last week. Yes, I will email it to you. And you're welcome to share it with anybody that you would like. Anything else that we are wondering about, having trouble with, that we want to touch on? I think it's also just, this is kind of a little bit dry, all these procedures and processes, but I think, it's so much more fun to fundraise when you have the support that you need to build those relationships. Like, it's just so much more fun when you're not thinking like, I've got to keep this all in my head, I've got to, come up with it myself. We're sort of building the plane while we fly it. Like, if you can get this stuff in place, then you're really in a great position, and it's just easier and more fun. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. I'm really excited that you all were here. Next week, we're going to be back. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you again to the library for being super awesome and doing all the registration and hosting this for free. I love the library so much, and thank you all for this wonderful facility. Next week, we're going to talk about development plan. We're going to get into the weeds of what's in a development plan, what are good fundraising strategies, effective fundraising strategies. We're going to dive into that next week. And then the following week will be the last one, and that'll be building your support network for you as a fundraiser. You are all fundraisers because you are here, so we covered that last time. Embrace it. And I'm going to hopefully see you all next week. I hope to. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Have a good one.